Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrea. Thanks for joining us again. The Open Dialogue series has become very popular. We're getting a lot of bringing people together and helping them explore their challenges. And from what you say, it seems like you are too. Keep letting us know what issues you want to hear about, something to do with partnering for a better world, and who you want to hear from as well. Today, we have some more amazing people to speak with you again. This time, the subject is meeting education needs during COVID-19, partnering to reach the most vulnerable. Now, some of us are becoming more used to being online, but not everyone has the luxury of access or the opportunity, and that includes millions of children around the world. Maybe even being online is not the perfect education solution. During this COVID-19 pandemic, even more children are missing out on education during a critical time in their development. So we asked our friends and experts on education and communication to lead the discussion with us today, to help us work out what action and collaboration is needed to reach the most vulnerable people. Some of you have suggested excellent questions, and we hope to get through as many of them as possible. With us today, we have Clemency Fraser, the Senior Programmes Manager for Africa for BBC Media Action. That's the BBC's international development charity. Clem helps produce multi-platform media content to improve health, protect livelihoods, challenge inequality, and build more peaceful and democratic societies. Danny Labin is the Vice President of International Projects at Sesame Workshop, the educational non-profit organisation that produces Sesame Street and other global educational media. Much of Danny's work has been focused on reaching vulnerable children living in some of the world's most difficult environments. Shimizo Rudzidzo is the Head of Exploration at the United Nations Development Programme Accelerator Labs in Zimbabwe. Shimizo is a digital strategist. She uses information and communication technologies and storytelling to support development in Africa. Oisin Walton leads the Vodafone Foundation's Instant Network Schools programme and uses technology to support education in refugee camps in partnership with the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR. He also leads the award-winning Instant Network programme that delivers communications to hundreds of aid agencies and millions of victims of humanitarian emergencies worldwide. Please do make the most of this opportunity. Let's try to get these people, let's try to get the most out of them while we have them. While the speakers are talking, you can use the chat function to ask questions. The team will do its best to answer these for you during the discussion or afterwards. If you like to ask a question after they've all finished speaking, just raise your hand by clicking the icon at the bottom of your screen. As I said, we've also received lots of questions already, and we'll do our best to get through as many of these as we can. So let's go straight to the big question for all of our speakers, and we'll start with Danny. Danny,
yes.
How are you partnering to meet the education needs of the most vulnerable people during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Great, thank you, Andy, and thank you to the Open Dialogue series for having me, and hello to my fellow panelists. I'm really excited about the next hour. Hi, everyone. So I'd like to maybe just start by giving a minute or two of background on Sesame Street, because Sesame Street was created to help the world's most vulnerable children. And the concept that really was the premise for Sesame Street was that children could learn through media and arrive at school, especially for vulnerable children who did not have access to preschool. And that is really as true today, 50 years later, as it was when we were established in 1969. We are the world's largest informal educator, using media in every form from high tech to low tech to no tech, and we'll talk more about that. But when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, it was very clear to us that we had a role to play. Media was suddenly even more pervasive and ubiquitous in the lives of young children than ever before, and it was already at a pretty high point. We also very quickly realized what an incredible archive of content we had from 50 years of addressing health and hygiene messaging, and from also tackling some of the more sensitive topics around socio-emotional resilience and coping. So all of that was sort of the background, but we really knew that we could not do this alone, and that partnership was going to be really the backbone of our ability to succeed in reaching millions upon millions of children with this critical messaging at such a moment of global crisis. And our partnerships have really encompassed everything that we've done, from content creation to, of course, distribution and implementation. We've worked with our existing partners who provide direct services like the IRC, BRAC, World Vision, several international NGOs that we work with and that have been really instrumental in being able to also think with us about how to reach vulnerable communities, especially at this time. And we've also been on sort of a skyrocketed approach to technology, where we've been exploring with partners like GSMA and with WhatsApp, and looking at how new technologies, emerging technologies, low-tech technologies, also have a growing role to play in reaching vulnerable children. So that's all been really part of our larger strategy. I will say that I think the greatest partner that Sesame Workshop has is embodied in sort of the characters that you see here on my shirt. See Cookie Monster, Big Bird, Elmo, Oscar the Grouch. These are the Muppet characters that might be familiar to some of the people here on the webinar. But it's these characters that kids connect with and are able to learn from. So looking forward to telling more. And that's all for me at the moment. Thanks.
Unmute myself. Hello, everybody. My name is Clemency Fraser, and as Andy says, I'm from BBC Media Action. Not to repeat the kind of the intro that happened, but I'd just also like to say, Danny, that was great. Thank you very much. I love Sesame Street, grew up with Sesame Street, know it, close to my heart. Yeah, talking of partnering, let's do it. But just to talk a bit about us. So at BBC Media Action, we work with partners across all of our projects. With our partners, we reach around 100 million people through our kind of creative communication and trusted media to achieve positive change. We work across governance and rights, health, resilience, humanitarian response, etc. But as for, for today, I'm going to be sort of focusing on our growing portfolio around education. And where we kind of fit in is seeking to kind of seek supportive ways for children, young people to access learning across a kind of the broadest sense. So we look at kind of enabling environments for children and young people to access basic education and vocational training, with particular focus on shifting attitudes and behaviours and social norms around, and sort of providing especially access for marginalised groups such as girls and young people with disabilities. And around sort of this in the COVID-19 situation, I mean, what we're looking at really is that we find is completely crucial at this time is addressing the secondary impacts of the pandemic. So that's around, what that means about psychosocial needs. It's around protection. It's about, what's happening to these kids, especially to girls who are now out of school and are more vulnerable to early pregnancies, to marriages, to domestic violence. So it's kind of coming in at kind of trying to build a supporting framework around access to learning. But we very much so don't do this alone. In respect of the question being asked here, is we work through partners. So we have an enormous we have an enormous number of radio partners where where we've been able to kind of just immediately get content out to across all of our countries, which has been completely and utterly vital, but we can talk a bit more about that later on. So I'm going to be quiet now and hand over to my next colleague, to my next panelist. Thank you.
Thanks, Clemency. I mean, it's really interesting to hear about you speak about girls and access and technology. It's actually in line with what I'm going to talk about. So hello, everyone. I'm Shamiso, and I'm part of the Accelerator Labs, as mentioned. So the Accelerator Labs, just quickly, so that you just get some context, they're a new initiative by UNDP. We are across 60 countries. And what we were tasked to do is come into the country offices. I mean, there might be an accelerator lab in your country, so just have a Google and see. But what we are doing is really just trying to reimagine development in the 21st century, looking within our local countries, what solutions are citizens actually solving their own problems? And how can we accelerate some of these solutions that citizens have already identified and probably solving their own problems without development agencies, without the government, etc. So for us during this COVID time, we've got a program run by the Global Fund, which is actually trying to keep vulnerable girls in schools. And as we know, it's already such a really tough task, as Clemency also said, and it's even heightened in this COVID time that we're in. So as the Accelerator Lab, what we've been doing to support this program is really using collective intelligence and really mobilizing ideas, insights, information from different organizations, thought leaders, uncommon partners that you'd sometimes never think that they may have solutions. And we're just really just sensing and horizon scanning to see how are these people really looking at e-learning and digital solutions that really address the vulnerable communities. It's great to say, great, let's jump on and get our kids and get kids to learn online. But really, what does it mean for sustainability during these times and ongoing, that we really reach these girls, these vulnerable girls, and actually give them access to this education that they can understand in their local languages, that they can access with all the challenges that we face with access to digital, to data, to Wi-Fi, for example. So I think COVID presents an opportunity to strengthen edu-tech in Africa at this time. So I really just want to connect with other partners and organizations that have already identified solutions so we can talk more about it.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Oisin Walton, and I work for Vodafone Foundation. I'd like to say a few words, context about Vodafone Foundation. And first of all, thank you to Andy and Alliance for Impact for inviting us to join this panel. Vodafone Foundation is a registered charity of Vodafone, and we invest around 50 million euros a year into Connecting for Good programs. So where we combine our cash with Vodafone technology, employee volunteer time, and the expertise of our charity partners. Vodafone as a company and its foundation have been doing a lot during COVID-19. This pandemic has really highlighted how connectivity plays a key role in society. Just to give you an idea, a few figures, on average, we've seen a 70% increase in use of our network over the last few weeks, while our employees were also affected, and about 95% of them worldwide were or are still working from home. In concrete terms, Vodafone and Vodafone Foundation contributed an estimated 100 million euros in cash or in-kind donations, benefiting around 80 million people across 27 countries we're present in. This has been through providing connectivity for health services, key workers, vulnerable groups, and cash grants to charities such as UNICEF, the WHO, and Red Cross. We've also scaled up a system called Bright Sky to fight domestic violence, which has been skyrocketing during this crisis, and repurposed an app called DreamLab, originally developed to support cancer research, to support COVID-19 research. So looking specifically at education, we believe that every child should have access to quality education, regardless of gender, country of origin, or whether they can afford. And in the context of COVID and many students being at home, we've been partnering with a number of organizations to increase access to home learning. So I'll stop here and look forward to discussing a bit more with you about these partnerships. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Oisin, and thanks to all the panelists. If I can ask you to turn off your mute so that you can speak freely, I'm going to go to our first questioner from the audience, and that is Shuan Shedegazia. Excuse me for the pronunciation, Shuan. I'm just giving you permission to speak using this, so you can please go ahead and ask your question, Shuan.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Shuan Shedegazia. I'm a researcher at the UN University, and currently I'm innovation advisor for UNICEF office in Tehran. My question is on how can we make e-learning affordable and accessible? Because so many solutions are based on smartphone, but they don't seem to be a viable option for many vulnerable communities. And currently we face that issue in Iran, that many communities don't have access to mobile or the smartphone. And if there is a smartphone, there is one in the household, which is usually used by the breadwinner of the family. So in those families, there are more kids, and many of them might need to use those solutions. But yeah, the only thing that is offered is smartphone-based solutions. So I was wondering, what are other things that are available, affordable, accessible for e-learning?
Thanks very much, Shuan. And I think we'll start we'll direct that one first, I think, hopefully to Oisin. Is that something that you can comment on first, Oisin?
Sure. Thanks, Shuan, for the question. Affordability is obviously a key barrier to accessing education and online learning in particular. That's why one of the reasons why we as Vodafone provided free access to certain platforms, select educational platforms during these times, and where we have other initiatives that we can talk about maybe later, where we provide free connectivity to schools and to students. Well, I think the first thing is no one can do this alone. So we're, for example, providing free access through our network, but we realize that, as you mentioned, smartphones are not cheap today. They're getting cheaper though. So we're seeing prices going down a lot, and we'll probably see good smartphones in the range of $30 to $50, which is still a lot of money for some families, but it's a lot cheaper than it used to be. But that's the whole point about partnerships. In the case of, if we take the example of Instant Network Schools, where we partner with UNHCR, we provide free connectivity, we bring the technology and partner with other companies and UNHCR to each provide one piece of the puzzle. So for example, Huawei will provide devices. We have companies donating free software to run the schools. So as a mobile network, increasing our reach, our network to areas that are not covered currently, making networks more affordable, making devices, but we also rely on manufacture of devices, more affordable. And then I guess more solutions that are not just smartphone based, but also simple computer based, or that can be shared, for example, in a community center for other users.
Thank you.
Clem, I see that you're nodding vigorously there as well.
Yeah, no, it's really, I just think it's really interesting, because I think, the sort of e-learning and on mobile technology is certainly something that I think is, it's out there, it's happening, it's a really good, way to be able to, for people to be able to access learning, especially now when it's so important, when it's got to be remotely. We've been doing kind of similar, well, we've been doing work through mobile phones. We've actually been looking at and have worked a lot with you know, what you call like the good old brick mobiles, and I think maybe that could also be something that might be an interesting way of doing it. So we've done a lot of our health work through the brick mobile phones, with kind of just getting very basic kind of messages through, and using bots, which please don't anybody ask me too much about those because I'm not too familiar, but just the idea of being able to have some sort of interactive learning experience through brick mobile phones using bots, I think is another good thing. We've also been, I think with a lot of families in our own context have also been experiencing that motivation around learning at home and learning outside of the school environment isn't that easy. It's not like an automatic type of thing. So something that we're also really interested in using e-learning and mobile technology is around helping those motivational things, the confidence for parents to be able to work with their kids and being able to bring learning into the home. So this is most certainly, you know, it's an area of great interest, and I think it's, you know, it's certainly the way to go. But yeah, how to do it, how to reach those the difficult to reach audiences who don't have access to mobiles, networks, you know, and to understand. Oh, sorry, I'm going to be quiet now. Sorry. Yes. Lots to say on that.
I just want to add to that quickly, Clemency. I completely agree with you. The power of mobile is really dynamic. And now we're seeing, especially in Southern Africa, we're seeing the power of interactive voice response, where a snippet of a curriculum or a module is sent via those brick phones, as you call them, to students. And, you know, mobile penetration is quite high in Southern Africa, especially in Zimbabwe as well. And the great thing is that it's not just a curriculum that's just for the student. There are also modules to also equip the parents as well, which, you know, a parent can also get a little bit of a module so that they can support their children during this time. And that's really a great solution for vulnerable communities as well, who may have a mobile phone, but they also want to stay tapped in on the learning.
Yeah, I want to just add on that because I came across a really fascinating statistic through our own sort of needs assessment around how to approach vulnerable communities at this time. And what was fascinating is that as mobile penetration has grown, radio use is actually also on the rise, which is somewhat maybe counterintuitive. But I wanted to just sort of pick up on some of the things around IVR and that Clem, you mentioned around radio, because I wonder if there might be ways for us to be thinking about content that can live on mobile phones, but might not necessarily require either a smartphone or sort of the high level bandwidth that apps and other content might. We've been experimenting with IVR a bit in Afghanistan and also in the Middle East as a way to also reach some of the displaced populations from the Syria conflict. And it feels like that could be a really interesting area to think about. So I just wanted to throw that out. You know, I'm actually hoping that after this panel, we'll also have the chance to brainstorm together. But that it just feels like something worth our thinking about.
So just to let you know, thank you for the question. We will be sharing after this call with everybody who attended ways of getting in touch with our speakers so that there's a good way to follow up as well. And kind of related to that question, we have one that was submitted earlier from Fernando Ramirez. Fernando, I'm going to come to you now. You should be able to ask your question now.
Great. Thank you, Andy, and thank you for all the panelists to bringing your time to this very timely webinar. My name is Fernando Ramirez. I am in beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I work for Bridges 2030. We're a small NGO supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and really our objective is to drive projects. We call it small projects with big impact. So this is a very timely discussion, especially as it relates to SDG 4, quality education. Having had the opportunity to travel in the last couple of years to many developing countries, I have a particular interest right now in the Middle East. But the challenges we see in many countries is obviously infrastructure. So welcome the panelists' perspective in maybe some examples. what do developing countries need to help adjust in their infrastructure for effectively delivering remote learning in this post-COVID environment? And any examples would be ideal. Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll just kick it off. You know, one of the things that's been interesting to see throughout the pandemic is the public television channels that exist in so many countries that are quickly trying to be dusted off. They've been neglected. Many of them haven't really been the focal point of viewership, certainly not for kids in so many countries, but the infrastructure is there. And I think what we've learned around COVID-19 is it's really difficult to turn something that isn't working well into something that does work well overnight. So I feel like one of the sort of key takeaways of this experience has been keeping the infrastructure in good shape so that it really can be leveraged and harnessed in a moment of crisis. You know, that's sort of specific to the experiences that we've been having with public broadcasters who are suddenly eager for content, but they don't necessarily have viewership. So I would just encourage any government representatives on the line to really continue to make that investment in good times, not just in moments when that's needed, because otherwise it's really hard to get it together at the last minute.
Yeah, I would say, echoing what Danny says, I agree, the infrastructure is there and the technology exists. It takes, coming from a technology company, people are often, when they talk about innovation, talk to me about technology. The biggest challenge in innovation is changing the people and changing the ways in which people use technology. And whether it's in the Middle East or in other regions, infrastructure is there. Danny mentions different solutions: TV, radio, feature phones, smartphones, computers. There are a set of solutions there on the technology side, but I think it's changing the way that we use that technology, avoiding duplication of efforts, and basically getting together and partnering to achieve that goal. So yeah, I think it's more around, as you said, Danny, and I think many parents will, and I think Clem mentioned this at the beginning about schools being shut and suddenly parents helping their kids at home online to do online learning. It was a learning curve for them too as parents. So I think it means a lot of preparation and investment in this space and partnering.
Yeah, nice. Is it time for me to sneak in a little response? Super. I am, yes, here to all of those. I think that, you know, obviously, you know, technology and things is the sort of way to go with in terms of this infrastructure as well. And I think that as far as infrastructure going from, I guess, a kind of a media perspective, what's been, you know, really vital for us in partnerships and working with, say, for example, our radio partners, you know, it's not just the kind of the content and the sort of the extra demand that they have on themselves at the moment, but it's also kind of supporting the funding of them, the ability for them to be able to run. You know, you know, we've been so, as I said at the beginning, we've been so lucky that we have a huge number of partners that we've been working with, so we could kind of just set to with them straight away and start getting content out. And maybe it's this kind of developing a sort of supporting environment for technology, for radio, for these kind of means for remote learnings that kind of sets people up with the confidence and the ability to be able to act quickly. And I think also, as I say, as these kind of secondary things as well, is to continue to support families to be able to understand the importance and to be able to kind of provide a supporting environment for their children to be able to still be educated. So it's around keeping girls protected. It's about, you know, keeping understanding that it's important for girls to be educated. It's, you know, all of this sort of thing. I think this kind of infrastructure is much kind of broader as well, and really important to be part of those building blocks, you know, going forward, should, God forbid, something like this happen in future.
And can I just add for 10 seconds is about when we talk about infrastructure, what was really interesting are cases of countries who are investing into their own educational platform, where they have the whole curriculum online available rather than relying on private companies who would resell that content to them. We have a number of examples. Egypt is one. Kenya is developing their own. I think that in addition to more affordable network and devices, will make things a lot easier in the future. And if it's embedded within ministries of education with training programs for teachers, that will increase access also for learners.
From the UNDP perspective, especially in Zimbabwe, is there anything that you're seeing from an infrastructure perspective, Shamiza?
You know, I tend to, just listening to my peers, I tend to agree. And from a UNDP perspective, we're seeing a lot of private sector partners actually, I think Oslin mentioned, are actually stepping up to actually support education and infrastructure within education. So we're seeing, you know, one company called Via Africa that is actually supporting infrastructure and working very closely with the government. So establishing those partnerships through private sector, as my peers mentioned, is very key.
And back to you, Fernando. I'm just going to unmute you to see if there's, to give you a chance to answer your own question from your experience of your travels.
Yes, so in my travels, I have had the opportunity to speak to several private sector organizations. Obviously in the Middle East, we have some of our focus geared towards the refugee challenges and some of those issues. But I think in the bigger picture, we really need to engage with the Ministry of Education. And really get the government support and the comment that was made earlier. Yes, but the infrastructure is probably there, but it is a different discussion and to some extent a different challenge, trying to seek the attention or the resources from the ministries, given that they're government entities and have a variety of additional challenges, especially with COVID and socioeconomic indicators that are being developed today. So it does go hand in hand, and we need both private sector engage with the public sector, not always a trivial task.
Absolutely, and maybe as a result of this this webinar, there may be some public sector, private sector connections and partnerships that that come out of it as well. Thanks very much for your question, Fernando. The next question comes from Nina Stewart. Nina, I'm just going to click Allow Talk, and over to you.
Hi everybody, thanks Andy. It's great to meet all the panelists. I'm calling from ICSZ, it's the Intercommunity School in Zurich, and I am a teacher associate in the Tier 4 level program here at the International Community School. My question is, how do we ensure the progression of soft skills for our students remotely?
Thanks, Nina.
Oh, that's fantastic. Like that question. I might leap in first. Sorry, as I already am. Sorry. So that's really it's a really interesting question that you ask there, and that's certainly an area that we also find, you know, really important, is the kind of building confidence, building you know, preparing for workforce, preparing for kind of, either entrepreneurial endeavors. And I think that during this time of having to kind of provide these services and provide this vital kind of support in COVID-19. So, so what we do, so for example, in Sierra Leone, we have an enormous sort of girls' education project, and it is around the more kind of supportive mechanisms for girls' education. So, and around the fact that you know, it's become extremely difficult to still be able to carry on with these activities, but we're kind of now, instead of, we're sort of pivoting it around still being able to sort of build that kind of supportive content for girls, and still being able to, you know, still being sort of remotely. So it might be about, you know, how do you kind of keep your confidence up? How do you keep your learning up? How do you kind of keep engaged with opportunities that may be with you? All that sort of, you know, sort of while this time is going on. And I think it's an extremely vital thing, you know, to be able to continue with this kind of work, because, I mean, hopefully, you know, this is going to be over at some point, and we need to be able to keep the momentum of people's ability to be able to kind of enter life after this with confidence and with knowledge.
I would just add to that, that I think, you know, media has a really critical and unique role of being able to model different coping strategies for audiences of all ages, but certainly for young children, which is the target audience of Sesame Street. And you know, the topic came up earlier around sort of secondary impacts of COVID-19. I think, Clem, you mentioned it in your opening remarks. And I think that sort of the gaps around learning are only going to grow. And when I say learning, I mean, of course, cognitive skills, but also the socio-emotional skills that are so critical to coping with everything that this has brought on. And that looks so different for different communities around the world. So I think, you know, the big challenge for us as an organization, and I think really for all of us who are invested in this, is going to be how to maintain in some ways the momentum around addressing these issues, and how to ensure that the rifts and the gaps and the everything that was already being addressed before COVID-19, and that's only been exacerbated through the pandemic, continues to be addressed. And you know, I just to tie it back a little bit to the question previously, that I do think both the private sector and governments have a role to play, different roles, but very complementary. So it's been great to see that both the private sector and governments have sort of risen to the challenge, and hopefully we can continue to sort of hold everyone to account so that they will continue to, when sort of the immediate dust settles from all of this.
Very well put, but much more eloquent.
And I also agree with you, Clemency. I think it's also tapping into the power of just old methods like storytelling. I think I mentioned I'm very passionate about storytelling, and we've spoken about the different mediums of radio and, you know, leveraging TV and going back to just using these mediums and tell stories like peer stories, that we can continue to make sure that these social skills are still shared virtually by peer stories, maybe.
God, that's such a good point. And you know, you've made me think of you know, the kind of work that we're doing around kind of psychosocial care as well. And exactly as you say, it's that kind of storytelling. It's the hearing stories that say, oh, that's, you know, that's me. It's kind of people that can connect to feeling kind of familiar with other people's situations, and kind of to learn from that and to give confidence. Completely agree with you. I think that there's a lot of value in this kind of programming across, yeah, radio, whichever means. Absolutely, it's a really good point.
Yeah, I think it's all about tapping into some emotional connection. So, I mean, you know, it's come up, and we all know how behaviors are the most difficult things to change. even under the best of circumstances. But really being able to engage with audiences, whether that's through the mobile phone or in a learning center or in a house or via television or radio, it almost doesn't matter. I think the basic principle of creating that emotional connection with a story, with a character, that's really the key to being able to make that change or to unlock the possibility for the change.
Well put.
Nina, this is obviously something that you're passionate about. Do you have a suggestion from your perspective?
Hi, I'm still here. We have been using basically any resource that we can during this time. Working with students who have special educational needs has made us think outside the box. And I think now that we have some time to reflect on this time, we really should have looked into doing some more storytelling and trying to really keep connected with those behaviors and with those social emotional aspects of each of our students, which all the panelists have said is very vital, which I agree with. I think we all know that. So having reflected on it, I think, yeah, we could have took it one step further, but I feel like this is a learning experience for all of us in the education world at the moment, I have to say.
Thanks, Nina. I think it's a learning thing for everyone all the time, on education, on partnering, on communications, on everything. The world's being challenged. Thanks very much for your question, Nina. We've one more question from the floor, and then I have some others that have been submitted. So I'm going to turn to Rosim. Rosim, can you please ask your question now? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Okay, well, while we're waiting for Rosim, we've been talking quite a lot, and you've been talking about the partnering. And I'd really like now to ask you about what you've learned during this period from partnering with charities, NGOs, with businesses, and other key partners before the COVID crisis and during this COVID pandemic crisis. And I think we'll start with Oisin on this question.
Thanks, Andy. Very good question. What has changed? Well, I guess the key in all partnerships is first of all having the same goal, right, and understanding, having the same ambition, wanting to achieve, because the most important is the impact that you're having, and then what is the role of each partner in that partnership. So the way that we've built partnerships is focus on the key strengths of each organization. For example, in our partnership with UNHCR leads on all educational and content aspects. We focus on the technology, and then we bring in partners for power. We bring in other partners for hardware, etc. So,
sorry, Oisin, can you just hold? You said you bring in partners for power. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So for the Instant Network schools, without power, you can't provide technology. So kind of what we provide is a solar installation. And so currently we're paying for that. We're using our cash to implement. So call out to companies out there in power and renewable energies. If you want to join and support learning outcomes for 500,000 refugee and host communities in the next 5 years, come and join us. Even if you can't give it for free, a big discount would be great. And we need your expertise. So in that area, and then in content, I mentioned the platforms that governments have been developing. Teacher training as well, which was one of the questions I saw in the chat. That is key. We're not looking to replace teachers with technology. We're actually trying to empower teachers in delivering quality education using technology, but technology is only a piece of it. So I guess, yeah, I'll stop here and happy to talk more about the partnerships that we have. But yeah, I think having the same ambition, focusing on key strengths, and having flexibility as well and trust between those partners is really key.
So you're looking for partners now, especially in the energy sector. Are you looking for any other kind of partners?
And content providers, so online learning content providers who can support us in matching the curriculum in the countries where we're rolling out instant network schools. Because a lot of the content out there is global content developed in Europe or in the US, which is not matched to the curriculum in the countries in which we're working. And the governments are doing that in parallel, but I think we could speed things up with specialists and supports, particularly, and I'm thinking of the corporate sector here to come in and invest in that space.
And I think that's the same question now to the other three panelists is, what have you learned about partnering during this period, and what kind of partnerships are you now looking for?
Maybe I'll take it from sort of the counterpoint of Oysen, who's with a foundation. So Sesame Workshop is a nonprofit organization. So many of our partners are actually our funders who contribute to make the work possible. And I would say that the most sort of fundamental characteristic that has allowed us to succeed with our partners during this period has been trust and flexibility combined. Because we were able to pivot very quickly and to work with our funders, our partners, in that respect, to sort of redirect our course of activity. We were able to create family specials that we had not planned to do as part of our original sort of programmatic plan, but that felt like a really critical way to engage kids and parents together during this time. So we created, with support from the MacArthur Foundation and the Lego Foundation, a set of family specials in different languages for different countries around the world. And that really proved to be, I think, only possible because our partners were trusting us to use the funds in a way that would deliver impact. And the situation changed. So our sort of commitment to impact only sharpened in its resolve, but the sort of means of doing that shifted. And I think that sort of ties back into sort of the question around technology too. I think we are definitely committed to making an impact sort of irrespective of the platform. And if the situation changes so that one platform is no longer relevant and another platform becomes relevant, I think that same flexibility that we've been able to benefit from our funding partners is also sort of key to our ongoing success. How do we make those adjustments as situations like COVID-19 or other crises really shift the way that people engage with each other and with the world? And I think we've seen that throughout the last 3 months or so.
And is there a particular partnership you'd like to have that you don't have at the moment?
That's a great question. I don't think there probably is one thing as like a one-stop shop for partnership. And I think that one of sort of the lessons of the experience with COVID-19 has been that different partners enable us to do different things. So whether it's mobilize with broadcast, mobilize with digital, that's been key. I would say that as we continue to focus on mobile, and as to Oysen's points, mobile technology becomes more accessible, more affordable, and all the more prevalent in children's lives, that we would love to build our current partnerships that I think I mentioned with GSMA and with WhatsApp, but to really be able to work with mobile providers around the world. And that is a difficult thing to do because every country has its own sort of mobile landscape. But any ideas for opportunities around that would be so greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Andy, I think for us, you know, as mentioned earlier, the Accelerator Lab is working a little bit different because we are actually horizon scanning and trying to identify solutions to some of these issues. And I think I spoke about the Global Fund program that is looking at initiatives to keep girls in school and trying to see if digital tools and solutions can somehow help. As mentioned, this is really difficult. So we are looking at who has actually succeeded in providing digital tools or digital solutions for vulnerable girls. I mean, what are they doing? So we're looking at uncommon partners, not your usual partners. We're looking at who's doing something dynamic, who has created an innovation that is actually working in various communities that we probably don't even know about. Who's having interesting discussions, who's building new ideas that have emerged from this COVID situation that is actually addressing vulnerable communities and actually providing new ways of learning that is actually sustainable and that is long-term. I think, as mentioned, you know, COVID really presents an opportunity to strengthen education technology in Africa. So who's doing something that we're not seeing? Who's doing something disruptive? Who's doing something that is not on Twitter, that is not on Facebook? So those are the type of conversations and partners that we're looking for. Your uncommon, you know, yeah, your uncommon partners.
So I guess it's my turn now, isn't it, to finish up? But yeah, so thinking about, I think the original question, which was sort of how we we're working with partners or that have helped us now, is that, yeah. So I think for us, I mean, you know, for us being able to carry on with our any content, let alone sort of educational one as well, is because of our, you know, partners, and the fact that, you know, we've because it's just so crucial to be able to be kind of working with them and have been developed these relationships over the years, that we were able to hit the ground running, so that we have partners that understand the audiences, they understand how they're accessing media, they understand what their barriers are, they understand what their kind of worries and concerns are, and through our work with them as well, we've been able to get to that too. So we've been able to kind of really help be able to address the crux of issues very, you know, very quickly and, you know, at scale. You know, just very quickly, we've got, you know, about 31 radio partners in South Sudan, you know, alone, and we're able, you know, with an audience sitting there of about 1.9 million or something, that we could immediately, you know, to be able to get our stuff to. So, and I think that it's really, this experience has really, you know, made us value our partners, you know, even more. You know, we work with CSOs, which are you know, civil society organizations who take, it's a bit difficult now because there's so much of our community outreach work, that kind of face-to-face stuff, but again, they know their communities, they know what they're facing. You know, it gives us incredible, you know, strength. And also our relationships with the government, you know, our work in South Sudan on girls' education, you know, would just not be possible in nearly so because of that. And so I think, you know, this has really proved how lucky we are and how important partnerships are in being able to mobilize quickly in the face of adversity. And I think just very quickly also is just to say that I think both Danny and Oyson, you know, mentioned flexibility and trust. Absolutely, you know, it's so crucial that we've been able to, you know, to be able to be flexible because of our understanding of the context of where we are, and we trust, you know, we trust our partners. They're go-to people, so that's also been really helpful and crucial to the kind of to the value and impact of our work. And as for kind of shout out about what kind of partners we're looking for, I think, you know, as I was saying, and I'm sorry, you know, my memory is shonky at the best of times, but there was, you know, the call before about the kind of the soft skills. And I think, you know, as I say, it's a really crucial area. So, you know, people that can, we're always looking for people that can help kind of support what kind of content that we're doing, you know, technical expertise to help us develop content. So it could be around those kind of soft skills that are so crucial at the moment. It could be about they say, the kind of the psychosocial support. And I think also, you know, talking about the kind of mechanisms for distribution, about media and mobile, definitely innovative distribution ideas and mechanisms is absolutely key. You know, how are we going to get to these communities that, for example, are media dark, who have no access to media at all? How are we going to get that vital face-to-face stuff in COVID at distance? And then last of all, of course, always looking for funding to help us in this vital work.
Absolutely, aren't we all? And is anybody out there with money that they need to put to some social good? Of course, Clemency asked first, but there's a few of us in second place. We'll try Rosim again. Rosim, you should now be able to ask your question. Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and I'm calling from Dakar. Thanks to all the panelists. I'm a former UNV volunteer. I happen to work with Ocean on the Internet for Classroom in DRC. From the experience from this project we had with Vodafone Foundation, there were two challenges and a huge one. Thanks for the involvement of the Ocean and his partner on this project.
Sorry, Roshan, the sound quality is really poor. You're being interrupted. Can you keep your question really, really short, and we might be able to understand it? Please try again.
All right. Okay. It's just regarding the instant network classroom. I'm just a passionate of online education. From the project we realized with Vodafone in DRC, there were two challenges. The first one was the infrastructure that was addressed already. The second one was regarding the curriculum. What is the progress so far in digitalizing local curriculums? Because in the refugee camps, for example, the issue of most of the African countries is the issue we face is the digitalization of the curriculum.
I'm sorry, Rosham, I had to pause you there, mute you there. The sound quality was too poor. I don't know if any of the panelists managed to get hold of what the question may have been and would like to have a go at answering it.
I didn't get the first challenge. I think he was mentioning his experience. And by the way, hi to Alex. Great to hear from him. It's been a while. The last time we met was in DRC, I think a couple of years ago. There were two challenges he mentioned in the INS. I didn't hear the first one. And the second one was availability of digital curriculum, which is the one that's one of the things that I mentioned and why I was calling for partners, particularly in the corporate space. I don't know if Pearson are on the line, but if they are and they have curriculum that they would be willing to put available to our program, but I'm sure many programs would like to benefit. And I just saw his notes. The first one was infrastructure. I'm not sure which infrastructure he's relating to, but it might be network availability. Which, yes, is a challenge in some parts of rural Congo. It's a huge country, so it's not available in all areas. But we're working on it. But yes, we acknowledge the issue.
Great, thank you very much. So we just have 2 minutes remaining. If I could just ask each of you very quickly to say what is the main message you want to leave people with today, your last thoughts on how to make a difference, and maybe your last call to action. Clemency, you've been practicing this. Do you want to go first?
This is my moment. Help! Well, I think that my last thoughts on the matter is to keep together, keep collaborating. Keep supporting each other where we think where we think we can help out, and I think that together that hopefully we can work to meet the educational needs of people around the world in this very difficult time and beyond.
Thanks, Clem. Shamizo, would you like to give your last thoughts?
Sure. I think for me, I think I've just been echoing this throughout the entire time I've been speaking, is like, really, how can we leverage this time to really push these technology solutions and really get more people, especially in vulnerable areas, to tap into these as well. It's not just for the urban contexts, but also for those who are in difficult situations, to also be able to leverage technology during these times.
Oisin, and then we'll finish up with Danny with the last word.
Well, I think I mentioned my call, but I'd just say, I think we all agree no one can do this alone. Whether you're a corporate, a charity, a government, a private foundation, there are a lot of needs. There's an ambitious goal, and if you all agree that every child should have access to quality education, then invest in this space. And if you're interested in partnering with us, we'd be happy to have a discussion. So thank you, and thanks, Andy, for the opportunity, and thanks to Alliance for Impact.
Great, and I think I'll just echo a call to action around education. I mean, we know that less than 3% of all humanitarian funding goes to education. And of course, a small fraction of that goes to early childhood education, which is such a pivotal time in development, and of course the target audience for Sesame Street. But if we look at education as a whole, how can we maintain the momentum around all of the incredible work that's been put into action over such a short period of time, and make sure that education remains at the forefront of decision-making going forward, whether that's around corporate decisions, foundation decisions, government decisions, really keeping education at the forefront, especially with all of the gaps that will be the result of everything that's happened over the last few months. And of course, it's not over yet. And we don't know when it will be, of course. So really a call to action for education for the long term. And let's start with that right now.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. I hope this has been useful. I will share a recording of the discussion with all of you that you're free to share. And we'll ask you also what you thought and how we can keep improving these discussions. Also, please do let us know what other subjects you'd like to get involved in as well. Thank you especially to Danny, to Clem, Shamizo, and Oisin, and to the Partners Alliance for Impact, the Sustainable Impact Association, and Impact 17 for pulling this together. But most of all, thank you to all of you for doing what you can within your own organizations and in partnership with others. Until next time, stay well, stay safe, and stay sane. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.